welcome back to the studio. It's June here, and what does June make me think about? Christmas. I'm always excited to do anything that works towards Christmas decoration or enhancing the Christmas holiday, because it's one of my favorite holidays. It always has been. So what I was thinking about was making or recreating the tree skirt, the Winter Wonderland tree skirt from Urban Elements, and I just happened to get in the 6-block kit from Urban Elements. There is 1 block for each of the 6 wedges on this tree skirt. I also have gone out and picked out my fabric for the background of the sample, which will be the actual base of the tree skirt, and probably in my case also the backing for the tree skirt. It is a Kona fabric. What was it called? I'll have to look. It's a green. It's a green because I wanted something different other than the sample that we used in our tree skirt, but I wanted something that also that would coordinate really well with the beautiful bright batiks that are used in the kit, and that would also coordinate with my house. So I'm going to go ahead and get these all together, and we're going to take these and turn it into this beautiful tree skirt. So we'll just be working on block number 1 this month, but we will be working also on getting the fabric cut. I'm going to go ahead and cut all 6 wedges today for the entire tree skirt, and then I'll just have those set aside so that each month all we have to do is pull our wedge out and get the applique started. On a couple of the appliques, some of the items will overlap the wedge, so we'll save some of those items until we get the blocks assembled. But we're going to go ahead and create or recreate this beautiful tree skirt and get ready for the Christmas holiday. And I always find that if you spread some of these things out, like doing 1 block a month, by the time Christmas comes around, you already have this project knocked out of the way, and it's easy to just pop it under the tree and get things going. So this is a really fun and cheerful thing to work on. We're going to head upstairs. I'm going to iron my fabric, and we're going to do some rotary cutting, and we'll get this project on the roll. Well, we're upstairs, and I'm going to start cutting the template for the background wedges. And the wedges is on the same paper as the placement guide for the applique. So I have my paper pulled out, and I've given it a little fold or a little press with the iron just to get out some of the main wrinkles. And also I'll tell you, the background fabric that I'm going to be using is called Tarragon Green. It's a Kona fabric, Kona cotton, and I bought enough to do the whole front and the whole back. So it's all going to be this Tarragon Green. And I've washed it like I do all my fabric. If it's going to bleed, I want to know now. If it's going to shrink, I want to know now. So everything in my studio has been washed unless it's a silk. And sometimes I don't get to ironing something right away, so this has got some pretty good wrinkles in it, and what I like to use is Downy Wrinkle Releaser. I don't have any affiliation with Downy, but it's just a product I really like because it helps get out the set-in wrinkles as you're ironing fabric, and it also smells pretty good. So I've already cut one edge of the template, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the other side. And again, I'm just using this straight edge to give me a guide to follow. I know some people might do this freehand, but I'm not that much of a rebel. And again, I'm going to use the straight edge, but I'm going to use I'm just going to give it a slight curve as I'm moving through the half wedge here. As I get to that point in the curve, I'm just going to go ahead and slightly curve the ruler as I'm going around. So I don't cut off the pattern. Now I just have this little piece here, and I'm going to switch to a smaller type rotary cutter with a smaller blade so I can get that curve. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this very carefully. I'm just going to be moving kind of slow. Again, I'm just lightly spinning the ruler just to help me get a line cut on that. Now I can use this big template to cut out my fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and get that spread out, and then I can go ahead and do this, place this template on there 6 times and get my 6 wedges that I need for the back of the tree skirt. Okay, I have my fabric ironed, and again, this is the Tarragon Green from Kona Bay Fabrics. I have my template cut out. The template is the exact same size for all 6 wedges, even though there'll be different patterns on them. And just to let you know, this is the companion wall quilt for the same series. It was called Winter Wonderland, and I've already done a video on all of the blocks of this. Hopefully by the time I get to block number 2 on the tree skirt, I will have a video posted on the quilting of this particular piece. This is just a top at the moment, but I'm going to go ahead and quilt that, and I'll have that hanging in the background as I do the rest of the series for this particular tree skirt. So we have the Winter Wonderland wall hanging, and we have the Winter Wonderland tree skirt. And the way that this is going to work, and we have it on the little map, a cutting map on the instructions. We'll cut 1 wedge here, the 2nd wedge here, and the 3rd wedge here. And then once we finish with these 3 wedges, we'll move to the opposite selvage of this fabric and scoot down as close as we can get to where we had already cut, and then cut the other 3 wedges from the other side of this selvage piece. So for the first one, I'm just going to go ahead and place this here. I'm going to give it a little bit of space so I don't get any of the selvage treatment in my actual piecing. And then I'm going to go ahead and lay the ruler. I'll use the ruler again as my hard edge to cut around the template, and then I'll go ahead and get my pieces cut. This is our actual cutting guide. It shows the 1 wedge here and the other 3 wedges here. So you have 3 and 3. That equals your 6 wedges you need, and that's just a blueprint for how we're going to cut this. I'm lining up the straight edge of my ruler with the straight edge of the paper template, and I'm giving myself some space on the edge here so that I'm not getting any of the selvage treatment in the piecing section of my tree skirt. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this first piece, and then I'm going to switch to a smaller ruler to do this little curve. And then I'll go back to the larger ruler. Again, I'm lining this up with the edge of the paper with the edge of my ruler, so my rotary blade has something to follow alongside. And then I'm going to come back with my smaller ruler and do this wedge here. But I am going to use the larger ruler for that. And this time you'll notice that I am off of the template paper, but I'm just using the rotary ruler as something hard to get the rotary blade up against, and that gives me a nice clean edge. So I should have one wedge cut. And now if I go ahead and shift this pattern so that the edge lines up, I should be able to get my 3 wedges out of this one side of the selvage, and then we'll move to the other side. Now you can see where I've gotten my 3 wedges cut out of this section of the fabric. What I'm going to do, just to make it a little bit easier for me, is I'm going to go ahead and spin this around, because it's this other side of the selvage that I'm going to be cutting from at this point. So it might take me a few minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and get the fabric laid out on the table. And you can see I didn't iron the entire piece of fabric because this piece is like 7 yards, and I was hoping to only iron the part I needed. So now what we'll do, in the last section I started on this side to cut my first piece, but this is the section that I need to look at. So I'm going to start my wedges over here, and I'm going to push my template as far this way as I can and still have the room here to cut without cutting in or losing a section where I've already cut. So I'll do my first one, my second one, and then my third one over here. So I'm going to get the first piece lined up, making sure all of my edges are on top of the fabric, and then I can get that cut. I have my template in place. The template's clearly on top of the fabric all the way around, and I still am leaving myself some green fabric on this side so that I don't have any of the selvage treatment getting caught in my actual pattern. And this is a little bit of a funny angle to cut, but I think I can do it. This will be my fourth wedge. Line this edge up with my cut edge here. Excuse me. Now I just have one final wedge to cut. And that will be my 6 wedges for the tree skirt. And I'm going to have to move my fabric a little bit to get it back on the table. Because I'm not happy with the way this is, and that's based on how I laid it out, not the pattern. Well, no, it's fine. I was going to shift it up a little bit out of where I had cut, but okay, it's fine. I'm not cutting out all of the center part of these wedges yet. I'm going to wait until all of my wedges are assembled and then just use a round template to cut around it. I did cut the one piece, but I don't think I'm going to cut the rest. So that is my 6 pieces. I'm going to go ahead and repress this piece that didn't get ironed originally well enough. But for those of you who may have trepidations about sewing together wedges and having them all line up, just keep in mind that the tree skirt has one open edge which allows you to wrap the tree skirt around the base of the tree. So even if you were off a little bit in your cutting or your piecing, that overlap doesn't have to be absolutely exact in order for you to get a flat tree skirt the way you would with a table topper or a complete circle. If the circle didn't line up all the way at the edge, you might have a little bit of a ripple, but you won't have that worry in this case because the one seam, the final seam, is left open, allow you to put ties or pins or buttons to connect the tree skirt. So if it's off just a little bit, don't worry about that. It's not going to affect the beautiful outcome of your project in the end. We have the first kit for the block of the month, which is going to be this section here of the tree skirt. We don't have anything that's overlapping from the first month on to the next block. We do in month 2, we'll have an overlap, but we're not worried about that yet. So we're going to go ahead and work on this first section. We have our kit, and the kit has all the laser cut and pre-fused applique components right in the packaging. So this is just going to be a peel, place, and press procedure to get these on here. We already have our wedges cut, so I'm going to go ahead and set up the light box, move you in just a little bit closer, and we'll get this block done. And I think this block is going to go together pretty quickly. I've switched over to the light box, and I have my background fabric laid on top of my placement guide, the paper that came in the instructions. I have my full color cover from the pattern kit itself in case I have any questions about the placement of any of the items. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the camera in, and in real time we're going to go ahead and put the applique shapes in place on this wedge of the block. I have all of my pieces in a similar location to where they're actually going to end up. I'm just going to scoot some of these over so I can go ahead and start putting my components in place. And this is a very easy process. All of the edges have been laser cut. We have pre-selected fabric, and they're all backed with a Steam-A-Seam 2, which has a paper backing on it. The paper backing peels away very easily from the back of each fabric component, and you can see just where those go. And the nice thing about Steam-A-Seam 2, these are completely repositionable. I can pick them up and move them, but they do have a tackiness to them which will allow them to stay in place as you're working. And sometimes with compound pieces, it's a little bit hard to see where a piece might go. So you can always start with some of these components off of the background fabric just to eliminate one of those layers. Another option would be just to lightly lift up the edge of the applique as you're working to make sure you're getting it in place. Sometimes if I just get a good idea of where a piece goes, then it's a little easier for me to actually see it through the fabric. We know that these three windows are just going to line up across the top. I actually am happy with the background fabric that I chose. I think it's light enough to allow all my pieces to show up. And I like the color. Well, green is one of my favorite colors just about in the world. We're going to go ahead and put our roof on now. And our chimney. This peel, place, and press process is very simple, and it's something that you could get assistance from younger members of the family to help you with. So this could be like a little family project together. They could help peel the paper backing off, or they could help with the placement of some of the items, and depending on their age they might even be able to help with the pressing process, but we will be using a hot iron when we get to that section. This little bird is used in quite a few of our patterns. He's almost a little mascot of ours. And because we use him in a variety of different patterns, the legs are all cut the same, but he's used in different ways. So sometimes the legs tuck up underneath the body a little bit more than others. And if you see that your fabric is shifted a little bit, try and go for the actual fabric that you have, not the placement guide, as your method of placing a piece. Because once the paper is gone from the back, the pattern, no one will know where it was originally intended to go anyway. Any of the dotted lines on the pattern indicate that that section of applique is going to go underneath one of the other components. Like in this case, this portion of the hat goes underneath the rim of the hat. There are really only a couple things that could go awry with a laser cut applique like this, and one of them is that the fusible web may not have stuck well enough to the fabric itself, and you can always go ahead and hit that with an iron with the paper backing in place, and then let it cool, and it will go ahead and adhere to the fabric as it's supposed to. The other thing is you may have a little trouble getting the piece of paper off of the back, and I always like to keep a little clover head pin right here on my ironing board, and what you can do is just score the back of the paper with the seam ripper or the needle, and that gives you something to fold over and an edge to pull up. I don't normally have a problem here in my climate in getting these paper backing off. They seem to just come right up. But depending on what climate you have, you may have different results than I do. And these little eyes, the little ultra suede pieces, are always the most difficult for me to get my hands under, mostly because they're so small and I've got stubby fingers. So now we're down to just this little section here, and these little curves, curly cues, are always fun to get in place because they feel like you don't know where to start putting it down at. But that one went on beautifully for me, so I shouldn't complain. But you can see just how quickly this project is. Once you get your background wedges cut, each one of these blocks you could have done in 15 or 20 minutes. If you were having the kids help, it may take a little bit longer, but that's part of the fun of it. One thing I will tell you, after you cut your wedges, all of these edges are bias cut, and so you'd want to just be careful how you handle them so they don't get distorted while you're working on the project. I think I'm down to my last two pieces already. And this little berry is my final berry. And that goes right in the curve of that leaf. If you don't like it, you could go ahead and lift it up and put it somewhere else. All of these pieces are repositionable. The laser cutting gives us a really, really beautiful crisp edge to all of these pieces. And the other thing you'll note is, even though this hasn't been fused yet, all of the pieces are in place. I don't have to worry about those coming loose. The only tricky ones are the ultra suede, just because they're a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier, and so those are the only ones that I really like to double check just before I fuse. But I'm going to go ahead and pull the iron out now, get rid of my light box for the time being, and we'll go ahead and fuse this first wedge of our Christmas tree skirt. I have my iron turned on. I have all of my applique components in place, And I'm just going to double check that I like the placement of everything. I'm just separating this particular piece a little bit more just to give it a little bit more distinction. And everything is where I want it. SteamaSeam 2 does require a steam component when you're fusing it. You could fuse this with a spray bottle and a blow dryer if you were putting this on something like wood, metal, plastic, glass, something other than fabric. In the room I have samples where we've done our laser cut applique on burlap, glass, wood, so those are all options. These also could be put on something like a canvas bag or a backpack to personalize it. So I'm going to go ahead and use my spray bottle and just give the top of the fabric a little bit of moisture. I don't generally keep water in my iron, that way the iron never leaks. And I also like to use a Teflon pressing sheet over top of my applique, and that does several things for me really. One, it protects the fabric from any dirt or smudges on my iron. The second thing is that it protects all of the edges of the applique. Sometimes I get lazy and I just push the iron from side to side. And if you do that with the fusible applique, you could catch the edge of one of the applique components and crinkle it up. And then when you put the iron on it, it's fusing it in place, but it's fusing it scrunched. And that's not the look we're going for. The other thing is that keeps your iron clean. So it works both ways. Keeps the iron clean, keeps the fabric clean. And it allows the heat to penetrate the Teflon pressing sheet, but you do have to add a few seconds. And I can't give you an exact time about how long it would take to hold the iron in place because everybody's iron is different. They all have different heat capacities. They have different brands of heat settings, so you're going to have to play with that. We have some general instructions on the back of the pattern that give you some reference points, but you really have to discover that for yourself. Another thing I would say about the fusing process, when we're fusing through multiple layers, like the door is on the house and the house is on the background, that's a couple, 3 different layers there, and we need the heat to go through all of the layers. So after I'm done fusing the front of this, I will go ahead and flip this wedge over, and I will refuse the entire block, including spraying it with a little bit more moisture from the back, just to make sure that we've totally fused that SteamaSeam 2 and it's had time to fully penetrate and activate. So I'm going to carry on with this and then I'll show you ironing the back. As you can see, I've fused the entire front of the wedge, and I'm just going to go ahead and flip this wedge over just to make sure that we've really gotten all of the different components fully fused. And you can see all the lint in my studio. I really like to concentrate on any of the items that are compound sections that have a lot of components to them, just to make sure that we've really gotten all of the fusible web gone through that process all the way through all the layers. I know if I give it a spritz and the fabric is dry that I've probably done a pretty good job of fusing that component. If we fuse this properly from the beginning, we know that this is completely machine washable. It's completely safe for the dryer. You can top stitch your components. We traditionally here just quilt over them. We don't top stitch all the edges. The fusible web is permanent if fused properly from the beginning, so top stitching every component is not necessary. I know some people enjoy it, but also some people do not. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then we will show you what the front looks like. This is our block finished. This is ready to set aside, and I just want to make sure I keep it without handling it too much, because the edges are on the bias and we don't want to distort this as we're waiting to put the project together, because that would just make it a little bit harder for us to get that done. So I'm going to go ahead and store these flat and get them ready for the next step, but we still have 5 more blocks in this series and we're looking forward to those. Hopefully by the next block you will have my Winter Wonderland wall hanging up here. It will be quilted, so that's my goal for the next video. We do have a nice catalog. Well, we have several catalogs. We have one for the pantographs, we have this one for the applique, we have tattoos and design boards. But these catalogs can be purchased if you like to look at something in hand, and we can mail one of them to you. This particular one is my old one. This is from 2019, but we certainly have current ones. But you can pick up a catalog just by calling the office or online. And we look forward to seeing you next month, hopefully with a new wall hanging behind me, and we hope you have a good afternoon.